Hey, Elevate 7-8. This is the final week of our long series called The Four Betters, where we've been talking about how you can love God better, yourself better, your neighbor better, that's the people you know, and the whole world better, because Jesus said we need to care about those people too. And today I want to talk to you about my dad. My dad died right before Christmas last year, and we loved my dad and we miss him very much. My dad lived in a nursing home up in North Dakota. That's where I'm from. And my mom still lives in the same nursing home. And my dad had what was called Parkinson's disease. He had it for 14 years. And it starts slowly. It affects your nerves and your coordination, your ability to do things, but eventually it affects your ability to walk. My dad could only walk using a walker. And then it took over his ability to speak. He couldn't speak clearly. And it controls your memory too. It affects your memory. And so every time I would go up and visit my dad in the nursing home, and visitors were really restricted because of COVID last year, but every time I would see him, I remembered the dad that I knew when I was growing up. And then I would compare it to the version of my dad who I saw. And it made me sad. It made me sad for this reason, not only because of what Parkinson's disease was doing to his body, but I would look at the staff in that facility and I would think, man, I hope that they don't think that my dad is worthless because he has trouble walking and he has trouble talking and he has trouble with his coordination. I hope that they don't look at him and think that he's worthless, because the dad that I remembered, he was full of life, full of energy. He was a funny guy. He was a high school teacher. He was a coach. He was athletic and he was musical and he was talented and he was really, really smart, and there was almost nothing that my dad couldn't fix. And so when I would visit those places, I would just walk away hoping that even though those people couldn't see his abilities, they wouldn't treat him like he was worthless. Because the truth is, as much as my dad had changed, he was still my dad. And he was valuable to me, as valuable as he was when he was able-bodied. My dad mattered to me. And I hoped that my dad mattered to them in the way that they treated him. Now, 51 times, no, check that, actually 59 times in the New Testament, it talks about how we are supposed to treat one another, loving one another, caring for one another, bearing one another's burdens, forgiving one another. And yes, this was written to how Christians should treat other Christians in the church, but I can't imagine that Jesus would say, treat the people inside the church one way, like you care about them, and then everybody else, just forget them. No. Because again, I go back to the parable of the Good Samaritan that Jesus told. Remember in the Good Samaritan, a guy gets beat up and left by the side of the road to die? And it says that two people passed by, a priest and a Levite, and they saw the guy, but they crossed over to the other side of the road and just ignored him and pretended like, I don't have anything for this guy, I don't care about him. But then the Samaritan came by. And the Samaritan not only noticed the man, but he knelt down and he helped him. He nursed him back to health and he paid for him to stay at an inn. And Jesus said, which one of these three do you think did what the Lord commanded? Now there's a verse that I love in 1 John chapter 3, not John, but 1 John chapter 3, verses 16 and 17 says, this is how we know what love is. So we've been talking about the four betters, how to love God, yourself, others, and the world. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. If anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? Now this is talking about material needs. So if you see a poor person and you don't have any pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? But there's people all around in the world who have needs, and it's not always money needs. It's not always hunger needs. And so to go back to my dad had a need for people who would treat him with dignity. My dad had a need for people when it took him a long time to button his shirt, would just stand there and patiently wait for him. Not yell at him, not get angry with him, not abuse him, but be patient with him, because they recognize that in spite of his impaired condition, he was valuable and he mattered to us and he should matter to them. And now I want to ask you this question. I wonder if you had met my dad near the end of his life. if he would have mattered to you. No, you can't be friends with everybody in the whole world. You can't be best friends with everybody. But I wonder if you had seen my dad, if you would have looked at him and gone, he's just an old man who can barely even walk. Or if you would have looked at him and as the Bible commands us to do, have compassion on him. And now I wonder what you think when you see a homeless person. Do you look at them and go, forget it, I'm going to cross over to the other side of the road like the priest and the Levite and just pretend that they're not even there? I wonder what happens when you see a person who has special needs. What happens when you see an elderly person who's maybe struggling to carry their groceries or to get them out of the shopping cart and into the back of their car? Do you see them as a person deserving of love because the love of God is in you and you want to give it away to other people? Or are they just a nobody to you? Because I want to tell you something. In the world that God created, nobody is a nobody. Nobody is worthless. And it's not an option for us to look at people who we don't know, people whose suffering we don't understand, and just go, well, that's not me, so they're too bad for them. No. In the world that God created, nobody is a nobody. And so I hope that as we challenge you to love God, yourself, others, and the world better, you take this seriously, you guys. That nobody in God's world is a nobody. And if anybody has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? And you might be hearing this right now and going, yeah, actually, I do that. Like I see people that I don't even know. And Mark, I don't care about them. Listen, you're not alone. I didn't care about people when I was growing up. I cared about myself. But what God does to you is he puts the love of God in you. And the Old Testament says he gives you a new heart and a new spirit. See, when God comes into your life and into your heart and he lives inside of you, he gives the ability to care for people that maybe you otherwise wouldn't care for, to love people who you maybe otherwise wouldn't love for, to notice and see people who you would otherwise just ignore and forget about and say, well, they're worthless, because you see the world the way that God sees it, that nobody in God's world is a nobody. And so let me encourage you that if you don't have God in your life, he wants to be in your life so that the love of God for you can be in you. And then you don't just bottle it up there. Maybe you're already a Christian, but you don't just bottle it up there. Then it multiplies and it overflows out of you, and it goes to everybody in the world, not just the people you know, not just the people you like, but everybody in the world. Because my dad was a valuable person. Even when he lost the ability to jump and run and be athletic and be musical and be smart, my dad still mattered. And I know you didn't know my dad, but I wonder what you thought of him. And now I wonder what you think when you see someone who's very different from you. Do you easily just dismiss them? Well, that their problems are their problems. Or do you have the heart of God in you to go, in God's world, nobody is a nobody, and I have love and compassion for that person? And if not, where you're sitting right now, why don't you invite God to come into your life? Because you might go, yeah, I really actually don't care. I wish that I did, but I don't. Why don't you invite God to come into your life right now? And just say in prayer, just in your own words, say, God, my heart needs to change because I don't love the world the way that I ought to love the world. I'm all about me, but I want to be about the world that you created, even the people that others would see as worthless. God, will you change me by living inside of me? God's going to answer that prayer. And the way that you change in your orientation and your outlook to the rest of the world, you're going to be amazed. Why not ask God to make that change in your heart today?